Okay, well, welcome to everyone who's watching us today. We're having one of our Rural Project interviews. We've got John Hindley with us today. John is one of the pastors at Broadgrace Church in Norfolk. And John, maybe you could tell us a little bit about Broadgrace Church and the towns and villages that you serve.
Thanks, Tim. Yes, I'd love to. So, Broadgrace Church meets in the village of Coltishall, which is a fairly large village for rural North Norfolk, about 3,500 people, if you include Horsted, which is separated by a river and a bridge, but they're basically one community. Um, and there's a number of smaller villages that kind of look to Coltishall. So, as is common in a lot of rural places, it's where the doctor is, it's where there's a couple of takeaways, a couple of pubs, there's a village shop. So I live in the village of Fretnam, which is just 2 miles from Coltishall, about 600 people, but we've got no shop, we've got a pub, there's no doctor. So people are going backwards and forwards to Coltishall all the time. So it kind of makes sense. If you live in Fretnam, going to church in Coltishall feels quite natural.
Mm.
So we're there. We're a church currently of about 70 members, looking to multiply into two churches, Lord willing, in September. So we'll be keeping one church in Coltishall, seeing that as a replant because probably 30 to 35 members will go. So it'll be about half the size, slightly larger probably, but not much. And then we're planting in Buxton, not the Buxton near Rob in the Peak District, but Buxton, Norfolk, which is about 3.5, 4 miles north. So not very far, but again, it's a more of a hub village, and it will bring a whole load more villages into the orbit of a gospel church. So we're grateful for that. We've been in cultural. Well, we were planted 16 years ago. First 3 years were in Hoverton, which is a small town about 2 miles, maybe 3 miles from Coltishall. But then we were able to move into Coltishall 3 years after that. We'd had great gospel opportunities in Coltishall, much better than in Hoverton. It was where the Lord was opening doors, and then He provided a building that we could buy and renovate in Coltishall. So we've been in the village for 13 years, but it's been the sort of focus of our ministry really since we planted 16 years ago.
Fantastic. And can you tell us the story of how Broadgrace was planted? It's very different in every situation, isn't it? And I think it's always helpful for people to hear the story of how you went from scratch to actually getting the church off the ground. So how was Broadgrace planted?
Yeah, there's different ways you can tell the story, aren't there? And they always become slightly mythologized in your mind. So I'll try and be realistic. And interesting, I want to start. So there's a guy I know who's a pastor in Norwich now, Stuart, who used to be in the Royal Air Force. And there was a big Air Force base in Cultural, RAF Cultural. It closed, oh gosh, I think about 20 years ago. But he served there, and he used to get a bus, an Air Force bus from his accommodation, which was on another airbase, to Cultural. And every time the bus went through Cultural, so twice a day, he prayed that the Lord would plant a church in a derelict Salvation Army building. He told me this a couple of months after we bought the building. So, so that was been 20 years before we planted. And it's just lovely to know the Lord, that was before and possibly before I was saved. So, this is the Lord is working things. For a number of years, before Broadgrace was planted, there was a church in Norwich, an FIEC church called Surrey Chapel. It's now renamed and called City Gates. Great gospel-hearted church. They had a fellowship group that met in Coltishall. They were praying for a church in their village. Um, and then my wife and I, Felicity, and I were up in Manchester. We've been part of a team that planted a church in Manchester that was called The Plant, because we lacked originality, and is now called Grace Church Manchester. Um, and and we were visiting Norfolk. In fact, we've been visiting Norfolk before the church was planted since we got married. My in-laws moved to Norfolk just after we got married. 20 will be 24 years this summer. And that was because my wife's got quite a big family. She's got five sisters and a brother. Most of them had ended up in Norfolk for various different reasons. Her mum and dad moved there when her dad retired as a GP. Her mum was still working, but she was a doctor and she was able to get work over there. So they moved to Norfolk, and we came on holidays there quite a lot. It was a lovely place to visit. We could have free holidays. They've got a lovely house. We get on really well with them and my wife's sisters. So we really enjoyed visiting it. We loved the area. We loved the people, but we saw a real lack of churches. We're about 7 miles north of Norwich. As a city, Norwich is not badly served for churches. There is room for about another 100, but for its size, for a British city, it's got a range of good gospel churches. But outside Norwich, particularly if you go north, Suffolk has a wonderful legacy of evangelical churches, particularly Brethren and Grace Baptist churches. Some of them now become FIEC, others are still Grace Baptist, whatever. That spring from the 18th century revivals. Whitfield's preaching met with a lot of fruit in Suffolk, but not so much in Norfolk. I think Wesley came. I think John Wesley came to Norfolk, but there was little revival in Norfolk. In fact, when we moved, someone said to me, Wesley didn't succeed here. What makes you think you can? So I said, well, only the Holy Spirit. I mean, I'm not claiming anything on Wesley. Um, so yeah. But Norfolk is really, there are wonderful gospel churches, praise God, but there are very few. I mean, probably somewhere between half a dozen and a dozen for the 250,000 people in North Norfolk and Broadlands scattered. I mean, you could drive an hour and a half and still be in Norfolk, scattered over a huge distance. So we began praying for the Lord to raise people up, and increasingly felt we should look into this. We felt called by the Lord to look into to Norfolk, to move in there ourselves. Talked to the church in Manchester. There were two of us who were employed elders in that church. The church family said, yes, go. They said, we can free you to do this. So we began to talk to local pastors, and Tim Chapman, who was the pastor of Surrey Chapel, he's now with the Lord. He had a brain tumor, passed away, gosh, a few years ago now. But he said a couple of things that were really um, significant. One was, you should come because you'll find it much easier to find another man to take on the work in Manchester than to find another man to come to Norfolk. Um, and he said, we have a fellowship group in Coltishall, and if you come, we will encourage them to join you. And that was massive, because we'd been praying for that little core to start a church with. And the elders at Surrey Chapel were so generous. They did encourage people. Not all of them came, obviously, but um, four couples from Surrey Chapel joined us, and wonderful godly people. One couple we've sent on long-term mission service to Central Asia. I shouldn't say the country for it being recorded. And another couple, Matthew, is a fellow elder with me now at Broadgrace. So, really not the kind of people you want to lose from your church family. And so that to us felt like confirmation from the Lord. So we moved down September 2009, worked together as a team, had a kind of soft launch end of January 2010, and then began publicly with 12 adults, which felt like a good number, in May 2010. Yeah, that was quite a long answer to your
No,
question.
it's really, really lovely hearing the Lord's work and through so many different people from that prayer at the beginning all the way through. That's so encouraging. I just aside from what we said originally, obviously this new church plant's quite different. It's not the kind of coming in from outside, gathering the group. It's more of the kind of, from what I understand, it's kind of the amoeba kind of dividing kind of churches. What kind of led you to make that decision? Because I guess there's always that toss up between, having a strong church with, good size of membership, and then thinking actually we need to branch out to a new area. What led you guys to that decision?
Yeah, thanks, Tim. I think we always felt like Norfolk needs. I mean, I slightly jokingly say 250 church plants, but actually, at absolute best, we probably have some sort of contact with maybe 1,000 people.
Mm.
You think you'd need 250 churches then to reach the 250,000.
Mm.
So Norfolk needs a huge number of church plants. We've got a fairly young, 3 or 4 years old gospel partnership that is right at the heart of what we're trying to do there. There is a huge
Mm.
need. I know it's not unique to Norfolk. It's true of every rural part of Great Britain. It's true of the cities as well. Like it's not, there's nothing special in that sense about the countryside. There's very few places in Britain where we would say, oh, they've probably got enough churches, if any. Um, so but we need a lot, and we'd always said we want to see churches planted. We didn't have any sense that that would necessarily be us, but we've been praying since the first day that the Lord would make us part of that. There are others doing it. There's a fantastic New Frontiers network around us who are seeking to plant, even in the Broads, which is even more remote. We're on the edge of the Broads, hence Broadgrace Church. Um, but further into the Broads, with the waterways dividing communities, tiny hamlets, and they're trying to think, how do we reach there? Yes, it's brilliant. Um, so that is kind of I guess it's always been there. And when we bought the building, we knew the capacity for the building was an absolute maximum of about 90. And we we kind of had a conversation. We were tiny then, but actually, if the Lord does give growth, this isn't an enormous building,
Mm.
and we said we should go for it because that will compel us to plant. If the Lord does give growth, rather than letting us become really comfortable. Um, and as we've got, year before this one, the carol service back in 2024, we had children on laps. And we thought, okay, for the first time, we've had too many people for the building. This year, we hired the Tithe Barn, which is the only larger venue in the village, and we had about somewhere between 110 and 120 people. Capacity there is about 130. So that kind of made us think, yeah, we really need to plant. We did look at going to a bigger venue. I mean, realistically, it's only the Tithe Barn unless we move out of the village. And although it can seat 130, the layout of the building, it was interesting. My caterers, they told me that we'd served less mince pies this year than the year before, even though we had 30 or 40 more people, because people couldn't get to the coffee and mince pie place. So and we got loads of kids and it was mad. It just the venue, it was quite helpful because we thought actually this, even if we moved to the Tithe Barn, it would only realistically increase the size we could grow to about 100, 110, so not very much.
Mm.
So we'd sort of wanted it, and it forced us to plant. So, I mean, we've tried to communicate to the church family, those who've joined more recently. It's not just that the building's too big, too small. It's that was always meant to be a trigger because we need more churches. It's sad. I feel quite sad at the people I won't be seeing. My kids are quite gutted at not being at church with their friends in a few months. It'll be easier for me because I will still see people more. We're trying to work out how do we keep friendships? How do we be genuinely two churches in really close partnership, both for the discipleship of the friendships we have, for some shared ministries like our toddler group, our youth and children's work, for some shared preaching because we'll lack capacity at some points, but also the next plant will probably be from both the churches together, realistically. So we want to keep ourselves close enough and aligned enough that Lord willing, in 2, 3, 4, 5, however many years, it was 16 this time, but whatever he wants, we can then together plant a third. So we're trying to do a lot of work around that as elders at the minute to keep that. So it feels very different to when we planted the first time. Personally, it feels hugely different because it was a small team. It was exciting. We were shaping vision together. We were going off. We were starting a new thing. Now we are replanting, but I'm staying. So I think there's an excitement about those who are going. It's harder to generate that. And we need to we're trying to talk about it together as those who aren't going to say, this is a new thing. This is a chance to refocus our mission in the village. It's a chance to enjoy again some of the things we liked about being smaller. We're at a slightly odd size, and we've deliberately not grown our structures and processes to the size we are because we're going to decrease soon. So it would be a bit silly to put lots of work into that. So yeah, so it's interesting how different it feels for me. Um, I think it feels. We've had a lot of pastoral conversations. It's been really good that have basically said to people, this is sad and exciting.
Mm,
And probably we should all feel both.
mm,
You know, there is a cost. It cost the church in Antioch to send off Paul and Barnabas. I mean, that was a massive cost. And it was a cost for Paul and Barnabas to leave that church that loved them and go. And that it's a right cost. It was a cost for the Lord Jesus to leave the throne of heaven and
mm,
come to Bethlehem and Calvary, wasn't it? And it's that pattern. That is the pattern of Christian mission. You go at cost, and um, the Lord is no man's debtor. He gives and provides. So we've been having those conversations and saying, and it's exciting.
mm,
What might it look like? What could we do? Let's dream some dreams. Let's eat together again. We've got too big to be able to eat together easily. Especially in the winter when can't overflow. But we will be able to do that again. We can bring and share meals again. We can, what's that going to look like? How do we draw we've got lots of friends in the village now, lots of contacts. Loads of kids have been through our toddler group, have been through the primary school rider assemblies, and now in the high school. How do we keep building on all that? So yeah, I think it feels different, but
mm.
lots of ways.
Yeah, that's great. We had a little question here, a bit more specific, which was what was the funding position for planting and purchasing, taking on the Salvation Army Hall?
Um,
If you really want to say. Pray, pray,
yes,
pray.
yeah. Um, so when we planted in the first instance, we moved down from Manchester. We didn't really have enough money. But but I think we'd experienced in Manchester, we'd planted there, and my wife at that point we she just graduated. She got a job as an accountant, and we sort of set our lives up to live off her salary. But from the start in Manchester, I was paid. And we were able with that to pay off our mortgage because we figured if we were going to be church planting again, which we didn't know about, but we thought it was wise to do. So we owned our house in Manchester by the time um, we moved. We needed to take a bigger loan to get a house here, but so that helped that we'd got a bit of money. Um, Church plant families give generously. People are all in. Um, and and I think that is brilliant. People join and they commit and they sacrifice, and I loved that. And so I was staggered by the giving from the start. We got some money from some trust funds, Gospel Partners Trust and Solar Trust generously gave us some money and invited us down to meet their like the people who kind of give the money so that they could be encouraged by what the Lord was doing, and they really encouraged us. That was delightful. Um, and it kind of added up. It sort of shouldn't have, but it just did. I mean, it was, the Lord providing through his people. Friends just got in touch. We got checks through the post that we hadn't asked for or expected, that kind of thing. Then with the building, that was a bit more complex. So we had some money from the church family. Some very generous gifts. We're not particularly a wealthy church, but a couple of people were able to give quite big gifts out of savings. We took out a loan, which was provided to us by Rural Ministries, a Christian um, rural charity, on very, very generous terms, so we could repay it. But we knew we couldn't afford the building, and actually, it was a yeah, it was very. We had a prayer meeting, and someone arrived and said, "Have you seen the Sally Army's up for sale?" Because we've been wondering about it, looking for a venue in Coltishall. There wasn't anywhere great at that point to rent. Um, some of the village halls have been done up recently, but they weren't in a brilliant state at the time. Um, and and we were kind of thought, oh, we should pray about that. And then someone else came and said, oh, I was talking to Liz and Julie in the tea room, um, which is like the village cafe. They've been given notice by their landlord. He wants the building back. They're wondering about buying the Sally Army, but they can't afford it. So we had a conversation with them and said, look, if you were happy to commit to being our tenants, that would give us the income we would need to repay the loan that we can get to buy the building, but we can get the loan, but we can't repay it. So, so we kind of did it. So although we're the landlords, we see it as a partnership. And the building is used by the cafe during the week. We have it on Sundays. We have access to a small hall at any point. Um, we didn't really want a building. We'd always said we liked being in a community building because it meant no one was scared to come into church because they were used to going into the building. And this meant that the building stayed a community building. So we called the building the River Rooms rather than Broadgrace Church. So it says the River Rooms on it. It says a piece cake tea room. Broadgrace Church meets here Sundays at 4 p.m. is the way it's kind of signed. So we've actually repaid the loan now. We were looking to plant again. We had a fundraising drive from within the church and some external supporters, and in God's amazing grace, we repaid the remainder of the loan. So now the building is providing an income that is going to help us to fund the next church plant. So we are looking for a little bit of external funding, but I think we need to raise about 16,000 either externally or from one-off gifts within the church family. Um, the rest of the costs we can cover with some surplus we've accrued over the last couple of years once we paid off the loan and the ongoing surplus. We have some offices as well that are rented out currently to our recruitment agency. So while they're rented, there's more money. When they're empty, there's less. But the Lord's again been really good at just supplying tenants. So it's like all church plants, it's a bit of a mishmash, pulling things together. But the Lord has just supplied. I mean, financially, it's been extraordinary. We got a gift. Got two gifts last year of £5,000, one from outside, one from a member towards the church planting. Not asked for. We'd not done any requests. Just said I thought this would be useful. No strings. Please use it. You go, wow. Okay, so that's a couple of days' salary paid. That's brilliant. Yeah.
That's great. Well, we've got quite a few questions, so I'm going to go through them each one by one. First one, thanks, John. Great stuff here. One wondering is whether revitalizing an existing work was ever an option. Are there dying congregations or not really?
Um, there there aren't loads, actually. It's interesting in Norfolk. There are very few um struggling churches relative to some rural areas. I think because of the lack of success of mission in the 18th and 19th centuries. So there's a few Methodist churches, but most of the ones I'm aware of have already closed a while ago and become homes. They always were buildings. There are some smaller churches, and we would be very open to that. No one's approached us for that kind of work. I think it was something that if that was, I mean, it's something that needs to be sort of a church needs to think, well, we'd really love some help. I think we'd be really up for that. I mean, we are fairly geographically concentrated as well in terms of our membership. So there's a limit to how far we could go to help another church, I think realistically too. So I think it's something that we've considered. The Norfolk Gospel Partnership more widely are very keen on thinking creatively, what could we do if there's smaller fellowships? Because we are in a part of the world where keeping anything alive, or starting something is really hard, and working together to do that as much as we can would be a really good thing. So I think we'd be open to that, but at this point, there's nothing in our sort of area where anyone is. I don't think there's anyone who probably need that, particularly locally to us. But yeah, it's a great question, and I think rurally it's such a good thing to do, because if you've got some faithful believers who've got um a work going that is maybe over a few years struggled, if you can put energy into that and revitalize, and help something to live again, that just feels fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Um, Rob's got two questions, one of which was on our plan, which is what were the unique challenges and opportunities you experienced planting in Norfolk compared to Manchester?
It's really interesting. So it was it was so much slower. I think that was really challenging. So in Manchester, in 5 years, we grew from a core team of seven to a membership of about 75. Um, and actually we'd grown to 50 in 3 years. Um, and I remember I can see David Pinkney's on the call, and I met David at a Acts 29 conference. And I was hosting a little table at one lunch on rural ministry, and David's in rural ministry in the United States, and we've been good friends since. But at that conference, I was interviewed, and there was sort of all these different interviews with all these amazing church plants, and I was feeling quite jealous and a bit hopeless, and I decided to make a joke of it, because that's what I do when I feel awkward. So I said, "Oh, tell us about how your church." I said, "Oh yeah, we grew from 12 to 10 in 3 years." Um, and and I got the laugh I wanted. But actually, I then got a load of conversations of people coming up to me in different parts of Europe, saying, "We've really struggled. I really appreciated that you gave that side of it." Um, and and that was quite humbling, because it wasn't funny at the time.
Mm.
I nearly quit. I remember about 3 years in saying to Flick, my wife, I'm just not cut out for this. The Lord hasn't gifted me. I was like Jeremiah, I'm not, the Lord's not given me the gifts. He's called me to something, and he's deceived me because I can't do it. And she says she said it nicer than this, but she basically said, you can't quit. The Lord hasn't relieved you. You've got to stay at your post until the Lord relieves you. Um, and that was good, and right. Um, but it was really, really hard. So whereas in Manchester, we didn't grow from other churches, but just loads of people move in big cities. We grew mostly with Christians moving to study or work in the city and wanting to get involved in a new church that was focused on mission, which then meant we had loads of really keen evangelists. And so we did see, in God's grace, people saved, um, but it was just much quicker. And people just don't move as much in Norfolk, in rural areas. People stay much longer. People don't tend to leave because it's so nice. It's beautiful, and it's a lovely place to be. And so there just wasn't that growth. It took a lot longer evangelistically because people have their friends. When my wife took our children to school, she began to realize that most of the parents had been at the school. They had the friendships from the playground. And it was, I mean, when we bought the building, I had a conversation with a guy I'd been chatting to on and off a bit, in the village. He said, "Oh, now you've bought a building, I might listen to what you say." That kind of, are you serious? That rural places are used to people coming and going. The local government Sure Start Centre opened at the same time as us in the same building in Hoverton, and that's long gone. People are used to initiatives coming into the village and going again. And so they're happy to wait and see. Let's see. If you're serious, well, we'll list it in 5 years. and I think, and I mean that it also is a huge advantage because people don't go anywhere. Those kids I was mentioning earlier, there's I had a lovely thing. So I went to take my youngest daughter around the high school to look at it. She's in year 6, and we walked into the foyer, and there's one of the deputy head teachers there, and a bunch of kind of year 7, year 8, year 9 students who were going to show people round. And when we walked in, they began singing, "Our God is a great big God," because I'd done it with them in assemblies at their primary schools. Um, and, and it was lovely. They were pleased to see me. It was really nice. But you think, yeah, those kids are there. Like by now, some of the kids I've done assemblies for will be having kids soon. And they're still around. And that's incredible. People know us. A few people say, "Oh, you're part of that church. That's a really friendly church." And you go, "Yeah, it is. It is. That's nice that you think that." So I think there's just something about sticking around for a long time, and I'll never be a local, but um, people say, "Oh, you're not from here." I'm like, "No, but I want to die here. This is where the Lord's called me. This is where I hope to be for the rest of my life because I love it. I love your village and I love your community." And this, I love that about rural ministry. So it's a huge challenge, just huge advantages. But basically, the other thing is people are the same. I think that was the thing that struck me the most. I expected it to be really different, but sin is sin, suffering is suffering. Um, you know, it's the same in Manchester as Norfolk in lots of ways. Oh, I don't, yeah, except you'd have to lock your front door. That's another thing. We lived in Moss Side.
Yeah, very different. Yeah. The other question Rob had was, what will your role be with the church plant, and how might that change over time? From what I understand, in a sense, there's nothing, is there? You're with the, is that right? Or
Yeah, so basically we have 4 elders.
Mhm.
2 of them are going to be in Buxton. 2 of them, myself and Matthew, are going to be in Coltishall. So Steve and Matt in Buxton, me and Matthew in Coltishall. So each church will be led by its elders. Lord willing, we'll raise up other men to join us in that because two's quite small for an eldership. We are going to have what we're going to call, as of yesterday, we're going to call Broadgrace Partnership. Um, and I'm going to oversee the partnership activity. So my role, just with a bit more time and a bit more experience, will slightly shift. So I'll have, uh, in a sense, I guess I'll have the same pastoral responsibility because there'll be 2 of us for half the people, so half the elders for half the people. Um, but church life will be simpler. I think being smaller again will make all that simpler. And our kind of structures and things simpler. And I'm better at smaller church. I like working things relationally. I can do organization. I'm a bit of a kind of like everything has to be at right angles. Like my computer is at right angles to the desk. Otherwise, I couldn't function. But I like to work more relationally. So that'll be nice. And then I'll take on overseeing the kind of shared ministries. We're going to do prayer meetings together. We're going to do our big day out together. We're going to do our January. We always meet together in January for the Wednesdays rather than going in our community groups because it's so dark. People just don't want to go out, but doing something different makes it a bit exciting. So we're going to keep that together in the church building in Coltishall probably, although we might go to Buxton Village Hall, that'd be fun. So yeah, so I'll oversee that shared stuff, and then we're going to meet together as elders. We meet at the minute weekly to pray and once a month for business. We're going to meet every other week to pray, the 4 of us, and then on the in-between weeks to pray in 2 pairs. And then one of those weeks where we're all praying together, we'll talk together about the kind of partnership, update each other on the churches, then we'll go into 2 twos to do the business of the individual churches. So we'll stay working together as elders, and I'll kind of oversee the agenda for the first part of that meeting, that kind of thing. So my role will change a bit, but not a lot. Um, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And then the last one of our additional questions from Mark is, how have you sought to identify, equip, call new elders and leaders to serve both the new church plant and the old church? Lack of qualified elders is a significant obstacle for us in making steps towards planting. I think that is quite a common thing, isn't it? So yeah, how have you managed to do that?
Yeah, it is. It is. We've been blessed. There's four of us. All of the elders were appointed from within. Um, uh, but over time, so both Matt and Steve moved deliberately to join the church because of what the Lord was doing among us. Matt wanted to study Crosslands, was thinking about potential eldership ministry. We've got another young man who's in the same position, but further, he's younger, studying. And they both said, could we come and do that with you? Could we move to the area? We said, yes, we would love that. We commit to mentoring you. I can't commit that you'll be an elder or that there'll ever be a job because we appoint elders from within, and someone needs to be in the church for a few years before the church family could be comfortable with us raising up an elder. So I said, I just can't promise that. It's not mine to offer. Um, and I can't ever promise there'll be any money. So if you're happy with that, I can commit to mentoring you. I can commit to discipling you. I can commit to there being a lot of ministry to do, and you won't be bored. Um, but I can't. And wonderfully, people have joined us and come, which is I just think, wow, that's amazing. That's so sacrificial. Uh, so um, so with the four of us, Matt, Lord willing, will be employed part time. Probably Steve a little bit. We're just finalising that. And we've got some stuff to share with the church family, so I won't share it now because we need their input before it's finalised. But it looks like there'll be staff time for both churches. Um, and and we'll look to raise up more elders. It is an issue. I think it's hard if you don't have, the elders within the church. That's really difficult. Matthew was part of our initial planting team. I asked him if he'd join me as an elder after about a year because he obviously was qualified. He wasn't sure himself, but was happy to serve. Came to desire it, and then Steve and Matt joined the church later at different points after they'd been in the church a while. People started saying, "Oh, what about them?" And as that me and Matthew talked, and yeah, we now have a process. We had a process for them. There wasn't a process for me or Matthew, but we put them through the process, and they became elders. I don't really have much advice if you haven't got the men to do that because I always have. I guess if there are people, and one thing we're going to do with the church plant, the gospel partnership are really keen on us letting other churches know. I guess as a precursor, there's some city churches have a number of elders. Is there anyone who'd like to move to the countryside for whom that would be a nice thing? And the reason they're not is is that they are faithful to their church. Whereas actually to say, actually, here's an option to be really faithful, that might be something to do to talk to the churches in the city. They're often really generous and keen to support rural stuff, but they don't always know what's going on or what that might look like. So yeah, I think I was really struck when I was a church intern for a church in Chesham in Buckinghamshire, which isn't rural, but it's a small town. And we were really blessed by a number of people who had been saved at big London churches, All Souls Langham Place and St Helens Bishopsgate. And then the pastors of those churches had encouraged them to move out and serve struggling churches in the home counties. And there were loads of churches scattered around the home counties that have benefited from that generosity of spirit from those big city churches. And we've seen the same locally in Norfolk, on a smaller scale because the big city churches aren't that big. But I think that might be worth those conversations might be worth having.
Um, it's one more question, and then I'll probably better start to wind it towards a close, unless we're going to go for a Joe Rogan style 3 hour chat.
I do, yeah.
No, don't worry at all, John. It's all helpful yakking, really is. Are the elders for the new church bivocational?
Yes, yes, they will be. Uh, Matthew, my fellow elder as well for the new church, the kind of replanted cultural. He won't be employed at all by the church, but he has his own business and um, leverages that to have time for the church. He doesn't need money from the church, but it's very generous in that he's sacrificing what he could earn to serve the church. The others are doing the same. They're sacrificing what they could earn, but they will be bivocational. I'm not bivocational. I'm full-time employed. Um, but we are taking a bit of a risk on finances, so I might have to become bivocational if, depending on what the Lord sees best, whether He wants to give us money or opportunities to share the gospel. For me, if I'm honest, that'll probably look like doing more stuff at home and Flick, my wife, working a bit more because she's a chartered tax advisor and can earn. I'm a chartered nothing. So she can earn a lot more in an hour than I can. So it might look like that's kind of how we've always thought of it, that she doesn't work full time, so she could increase. And yeah, but that's for the future. Yeah.
Oh, thanks so much, John. And particularly thank you for earlier on sharing about the hard time of going from 10 to 9. I'm sure many of us have appreciated some of your books, like Serving Without Sinking and Weakness is Our Strength. And I think, sadly, so often when people give helpful stuff for when you're weak and struggling, it's often means you've gone through a hard time yourself. And I think it's really helpful for everyone to know that, often we think of church planters as the sort of alpha male, I will kind of like conquer all things. And those guys tend to be the ones that burn out in flames, don't they? And actually, often in ministry, we do feel like we can't do this, and it's good to know that the Lord's strong enough to keep you going in the midst of that. And I hope that's an encouragement if anyone feels that watching here, because I think probably most people go through that at some stage or other.